Right. Danielle Yuthas, thank you for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you on. We were talking pre-roll about your background. I think it's amazing, definitely aesthetically pleasing for the audience and for those tuning in visually. It's nice to have that. But again, thank you for the time. We, like I said, pre-roll, we love touching base and getting to know folks throughout the franchising world, whether that's a franchisee, a franchisor, franchise consultants, folks in broker networks. For us, it's really about just getting the franchising world name, I guess, out there in the hands of more folks because it's such a great business model, we think. And one that I think alludes to just the American spirit and such of empowering individuals to become business owners and do it not on their own. So, with that said, Danielle, if you wouldn't mind giving us a quick intro of your background and your current role, that'd be a great place to start.
Sure. I'm glad you just said empowering. That's our favorite word at Empower Brands. So
Yeah.
that's exactly what we're doing is we're empowering business ownership. It's in the home services space primarily. We have 11 different brands that are under the whole umbrella. Um, and so my background, I'm right now doing franchise development, marketing, lead generation primarily for all of the 11 brands in the portfolio as well as Empower Brands itself. And prior to that, I was more focused on the B2B consumer side, meaning I was with Speed Pro, which is in large format printing, and we were generating leads for franchisees based on getting business leads, having businesses to come in and be clients for vehicle wraps and
Yeah.
wall murals and signage and things like that. And prior to that, I was at WellBiz Brands, lifestyle home and lifestyle brands, brick and mortar. And before that, I was at Ace Hardware. So that's totally different
Yeah.
animal in the hardware space. And that's where I started my career in franchising. So I've been
Okay.
in franchising for 10 years.
Amazing. Well, thank you for that background. I'm curious to know with the marketing vein in particular, when new franchisees come into one of these 11 brands under Empower, is there any sort of like, I don't want to call it conflict because I doubt that it's that, but like, is there any sort of like expectation that they had from the marketing department at Empower that they now realize, oh, I've actually got to do this when I thought, corporate marketing was handling that? Or is it, or reverse? Like they come in thinking, oh, they've got to do all things marketing, and your team shows up and you're like, oh, Brad, you actually don't have to handle anything digital, or if you want to do local marketing, like we put together all of the care packs, the signage, all that's like. Talk to us a little bit about just what that marketing tactic looks like as you bring on new franchisees and their responsibilities versus corporate.
Yeah, it's exactly that. We're very upfront with what we provide versus what owners provide during our Discovery Day, Empower Day process. But basically, most of the franchisees are surprised when they come in of how much we offer and how much we can do for them and help them to do on their behalf. So it's very, very easy. It allows them to focus on working on the business and not getting in the weeds trying to figure out how to do all their own marketing and branding and all of that kind of thing. And we find that that gets franchisees to profitability faster, to not be distracted with a lot of that.
Totally. What are you? Can you talk about just the marketing channels as it relates not only to home services, but I'm sure the brands, even the brands you work with, probably have some nuances to them in terms of where the customer exists. For us in junk removal, first page of Google. If you're not spending a lot of time there because it's a very reactive business, especially on the residential side, like Danielle, you go out in your garage today and you have a knee jerk reaction. I got to get this thing cleaned up, right? So you're going to Google junk removal Denver. If you don't pop up on the first page of Google, you're kind of screwed. There's obviously other channels for us in junk removal that we can attack, like Facebook ads. You're seeing folks starting to get into like the streaming services space and creating like old school commercials, but they show up in streaming services. Obviously, direct mailers, yard signs. Like for us, those are all kind of industry standard marketing tactics in the junk removal space, but very much Google, head and shoulders above all. What do you see in terms of the channels that are successful with Empower and the brands that you guys have in home services?
Yeah, it is different per brand because some of our brands are very, very different. But for brands that are, something like Bumble Roofing or Canopy Lawn Care or Outdoor Lighting Perspectives or Architect, where it's in your neighborhood, a lot of it is just having a really great professional branded vehicle wrap, yard signs if client, that you can leave behind for clients and things like that, getting a lot of Google reviews. We
Mhm.
do Google across the board, also social media, Facebook ads. On the FranDev side, we do a lot of those kinds of things as well: Google, Facebook,
Yeah.
industry publications, PR. I mean, kind of the full gamut. Some of our brands that are more like Jan Pro or First Team, where we're looking for a different type of business owner type client, or a dry cleaner that wants to convert to a restoration business or something like that. It's a little bit different, but even whether it's FranDev or consumer side, the channels are relatively similar. It's mostly the content and the budgets that are
Yeah.
a little bit different.
Makes a lot of sense. Do you have visibility into like the top franchisees within the Empower brands and like one, obviously their numbers, like who's performing best? Like, do you have visibility into that? And second part of that question, if you do you have visibility into what those top producing franchisees under the brand are doing from a market, like taking on a responsibility with their local marketing to say, hey, yard signs are really killing it for us, or we tend to spend a lot of time at the Chamber of Commerce just networking, or do you get any of that type of feedback from like the top franchisees from a marketing perspective and what they're doing?
Absolutely. And that's also what part of the value of being a platform brand is where we can see not only what the top franchisees in one brand are doing, we can see what the top franchisees across the brands are doing. And that's actually why we're combining our annual convention this year,
Hmm.
or I guess 24, um, so that we can bring all of the franchisees together and all of, to kind of get all the best practices collectively.
Yeah, I think that's great. It's phenomenal. I learned about a technology tool on a podcast. I was listening to a podcast 2 days ago, I think, and it was something about it's an analytics tool that us franchisors probably should be using in our business to aggregate all of the data, not just for our own brands, right? If I've got 100 units or 100 franchisees, they all should know kind of how they're stacking up numbers wise relative to their
Mhm.
peers in that brand, but also it aggregates data across all of the franchises across the country, which I think is unique. But I think if I were a franchisee, I'd probably be most um, interested in what other franchisees specific to my brand is doing. So I thought that was an incredible tech stack. Do you guys do any sort of like marketing at the corporate level for commercial accounts that you can then disseminate down to the franchisees? Like, hey, we've got a new job for Walmart or Target or anybody.
Mhm.
Do you guys do try to reach out to
We
corporate accounts?
do. Our brand Superior Fence and Rail has a partnership with Home Depot, just as
Okay.
one example. So we
Yeah,
do a lot of that where we try
amazing.
to take as much off of the franchisees as possible.
That's amazing. We found, at least in our space with junk removal, like the residential side is kind of the mainstay. That's what you have to be prepared and ready to deploy same and next day to get on site and take care of those residential customers. But the better, I shouldn't put it that way, but you want the corporate accounts. You want the Home Depots who have ongoing needs at thousands of stores across the country if you can service them. And then bring that into your franchisees. Obviously, that's a free lead for the franchisee. It costs money for the brand, but free to the franchisee. But it's a huge selling tool in the Fran Dev process. Can you talk to us a little bit about? You mentioned that you're in Fran Dev. At what level are you involved in franchise development? Kind of what your role and responsibilities are there?
I'm doing franchise development marketing, primarily lead generation. So I'm really looking for what pond do we fish in for which brands and how can we get the most leads in. And we've dabbled in print a little bit. We're looking at some of the streaming stuff, but my primary focus is on the digital side. And that's also my background from agency side too.
Okay. And when you say that, are you referring to like SEO, Google paid ads to help drive leads to Davis is interested in potentially one of your brands, that's available in Charlotte. I submit, are you trying to reach me by way of a Google ad, hoping I maybe land on your website organically, or are you guys leveraging paid channels of like franchise specific lead gen tools that exist that you pay to play, like, $1,000 a month or whatever, you get unlimited leads, like, or is it both? Are you guys doing organic SEO and paid?
We're testing quite a few different things right now across brands, but a lot of it is Google, paid social, and SEO. Those are kind of the key, the core focuses right now as we get everything going in. But in the new year, we want to do some things that are a little bit more fun, a little bit more outside the box. One example is like we came up with a quiz about which brand, what brand would you fit? Kind of like one of those
Oh yeah.
fun magazine quizzes. Like, what
Mhm.
brand would you be a good fit for
Yeah.
based on your personality style, or something like that? But our core is doing a lot of Google outreach and
Yeah.
demand capture and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I bet those are probably pretty eye opening for that fun tactic would probably be pretty eye opening and helpful for folks looking to get into brands. So somebody might be like, "Oh, I think I'd be great in the fencing space," and then they take that little quiz, and it's like, "Oh, you'd be better at blinds." Help steer them kind
Yeah,
of in the right
it's kind of
direction.
funny.
Um,
It's
that's
also
interesting.
tough because a lot of people don't know what franchising means. They think that they have to have millions of dollars and buy a QSR and build it
Mhm.
out in a high expense area. They don't really realize how accessible some of these franchises that we're talking about can be.
Yeah, totally. Can you highlight some of the best practices from a marketing perspective when you're trying to in franchise development, trying to reach potential candidates? Is it best to have like a franchise specific website, a landing page that's separate from your consumer facing ones? As an example, just kind of thought of that there, but like, what are some examples like that in terms of just industry best practices to help generate those lead candidates for potential franchisees?
That's a really good question. The messaging is totally different. I mean, people that are looking to own a business are different than the person that's looking for the service. So you want to keep it separate to a certain degree, but then you also still want to get the link juice, referral traffic back and forth. And if
Yeah,
you have really good clients that really love your brand and they're ambassadors of your brand, you want them to be able to also know about the opportunity of business ownership.
totally.
So it's a really fine line because then, can you try to sell the business to a franchisee's client? That kind of
Mhm.
is where it's like, what are all the rules and parameters there? But I think basically best practice is to keep it separate enough, but to still where it's cross reference. So maybe it's a landing page on your core site, or maybe they're two separate sites, but they link back and forth to each other and
Yeah,
share content and things like that.
yeah. Yeah, we tend to believe that too. Just, I mean, logically, it makes sense. I feel like. What's the core belief there? Maybe your own personal core belief, Danielle, in 2024. Like, what do the customers want to consume? Whether that's consumer facing, empower brands websites for the services they want to consume, or franchisee candidate facing in terms of what they want to consume. Are you guys kind of a blend between written and video? Do you go all in on video? If so, is that long form video, short form? Like, just talk to us about maybe your personal like core beliefs on you
I
know.
love video and I think it's extremely effective, especially for something like this where you're going, okay, we need to explain what business ownership means, what the relationship is between the franchisee and the franchisor. There's so many things to explain, and people have short attention spans. So I think video where you're doing, maybe like a video ad and then something that explains it, shorter as the hook, and
Mhm.
then on the landing page or farther down the line, longer form. The only issue with video is that it's expensive, or more expensive than not using video. So,
Yeah,
if you can get video, try to get as many pieces or clips out of it or repurpose it as many different ways as you can, and think
Mhm.
through that when you do a full day shoot. Try to get as much as you can out of it.
Totally. That makes a lot of sense. Can you take us back to the start of kind of your professional journey and maybe what your background was coming out of school, what your education was, and how you kind of ended up in, like, did you always know that you wanted to do marketing? Did you always know that you wanted to do marketing for, the franchise space? Just kind of take us through the evolution of Danielle.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, my mom was in marketing and had a marketing background for Hyatt hotels, so I was interested in that. And then I went to school for journalism because I figured writing was be a core skill I could use for whatever. And then
Yeah.
I graduated at the time that the main newspaper in Denver was closing and no journalists had jobs. And so then I started working for an ad agency writing content for websites. And that is how I learned SEO, which then led me into Google Ads, paid social, and I became the
Mhm.
director of search engine marketing for a local agency. And when I got burned out of the hours and the agency side and all the different clients and all the things going on, I wanted to give in house a try. So I went to Ace Hardware. I worked for a regional co op, not knowing what a regional co op was. So that was interesting experience um, on the digital marketing side. And then I got brought over to WellBiz Brands, and WellBiz Brands is where I really learned and understood what was going on from a multi franchisor platform kind of brand, and learned a lot there. And then at Speed Pro, I was the vice president of marketing. So I got and was on the executive leadership team. So I got really involved and learned even more of the ins and outs and the legal side and I got my CFE and all of those kind of things. Then I
Very
just
cool.
recently came over to Empower this year.
So very, very much so. Always been into the creative space, I would say. But with journalism, I would say that that falls within that. Obviously, what you're doing today within marketing is very cool. Um, a unique question that I like to ask folks, like regardless of your role, whether you're a franchisor, franchisee, or broker, whatever, or even just a small business owner, not part of a franchise brand. But I think it'd be an interesting question to ask you as well. What if folks, and I don't want to call it the dark side because I don't know that there's a dark side of franchising, but like, what if folks not know about the franchising world that tends to become like an aha moment at some point, whether it's a candidate going through the fran dev process, it's a new franchisee who's a year in with, superior fencing. What is there like a common theme that tends to pop up? Like this is the aha moment for folks most of the time with franchising specifically.
Well, I think the biggest, most overarching aha moment is how profitable it can be and
Yeah.
how you can scale it. And once you figure out how to get out of the day to day working on the operations and look at the business overall and you learn to dial it in, it can be extremely profitable. But I think also from starting up from outside of franchising, getting into it, you can't just start a business, franchise it, scale it up, sell a bunch of locations. It has to have the core fundamentals. It has to have the core operations and marketing in place
Mhm.
before you start scaling it too fast. Otherwise, you're going to have a period of time where you have to go back and fix things and clean things up for a while before you can start selling again.
Yeah. I would say that's a theme across most of the conversations I've had with folks as I've learned the franchising space. It's and I'm going to throw out a cliche term here, but responsible franchising. And I think that's very much needed for new franchisors like us that are coming on the scene because it makes a lot of sense, not because I've been through the gamut and I know, but it just makes sense at a fundamental level that, if you're going to start something, you shouldn't be trying to sell as many units as possible just because you want to get to an exit at some point, because that exit ultimately is not, for one, the exit to me probably isn't as lucrative as it could be if you scaled it too quickly, right? And you've got pissed
Right.
off franchisees, and or you don't have the infrastructure in place, whether that's people or systems or processes, to make it look attractive to another company or person coming in looking to buy. So I totally align with that there. At Empower's level, are you guys specifically focused on home services, or do you dabble in retail, brick and mortar at all, or maybe going to move into that space, or is it all home services?
We have most of our brands are home services, although we also have First Team, which is in the restoration space. So they have a full warehouse and facility where they're bringing in and doing the restoring of
Mm.
electronics and fabric and things like that, like for flood and
Yeah.
fire damage and that kind of thing. JanPro has a regional developer model that's available, so that's sort of more of a office kind of thing. Intelligent Office is office actual like remote office spaces. So we have a little bit of a variety in there, but our roots, so to speak, were in a
Okay.
lot of the home service side.
Awesome. That's all. We're obviously in the home services space as well, but I think, and we're obviously a little biased, but I think it's just a great space to be in, having come out of something that I've never experienced in my life, which is a pandemic. 3.5 years of that, and understanding the need that folks are going to have at their homes, regardless of economic conditions. Everybody goes back to work, goes back to an office, like they still live in homes and have needs there. Or pandemic rolls through, and everybody's working from home, and they probably have even more needs now that they're working from home. So I just think it's a great space. Last two questions, Danielle, kind of fun ones. What's your favorite tool in marketing that you use or your team uses that is like, oh, we couldn't live without this? I'm sure you guys have like a laundry list of hundreds of these things, but I'm always curious just to know.
We do, but I'm going to go kind of rogue and throw out one that maybe you haven't heard before on here. That's not
Okay.
really an empower type tool, but it's a personal tool that I just really love, which is SparkToro.
Okay.
You can learn a lot about different audiences, and you can put in, people who follow a certain Facebook page or who follow certain media, and you can learn how to build audiences that it's similar to building lookalike audiences, but you have a lot more visibility into it.
Interesting. Okay. I'll take a look at that. Yeah, I haven't heard that one.
And
My
fish can.
extent, yeah, my extent of like marketing tools is like I know a little bit about Figma. I think they were just going to be bought out by ADP, was it? And that got the kibosh, and so they're now back as their own company. But yeah, I'll definitely look into that one. And then lastly, if you could go back to your younger self, Danielle, if that was a year ago, 5 years ago, 20 years ago, and just tell your younger self something that says, hey, it will be helpful for you to know this at this stage in your life as it relates to your role now. Anything come to mind that you would tell your younger self? Just, hey, good piece of information, a little nugget of information here, Danielle, that would be helpful for you later on.
Um, I think it's really just, put yourself in the shoes of the entrepreneur. Always
Mm,
be franchisee first, because if you start out at a franchisor instead of as a franchisee, you might go, okay, well, we want everybody to do it this way, but you need to know what's actually going on with individual businesses and know whatever their unique circumstances are. And if they're coming at you guns blazing, there's probably a really good reason behind it, and it
yeah.
matters to take the time to figure out what that reason is before you
Mm.
make any kind of decisions around it.
Totally. That's such a great point, and I think that that can be applied to really any department in any person throughout the organization. I mean, that resonates with me as a business owner, not just from like a marketing perspective or anything, but like as a manager of people. Guys that we have in the field that perform jobs, and being able. I think listening is just a lost art, and it is an art. The people respond to people who care. I think is one that comes to mind. Like they don't really care how much you know until they know how much you care, type of saying. And so, yeah, that's a good one. Well, Danielle, really appreciate you being on. Hopefully, the audience got some insights here into the marketing side of home services, both on Fran Dev and consumer side. So, thank you for joining us. If you want folks to find you, to find Empower, what's the best way for them to reach out or find you?
Sure. There's all of the websites, but the for each brand. But Empower Franchising, and then I'm also on LinkedIn, Danielle Yuthas, Yuthas, or all the brands are on LinkedIn as well.
Amazing. We'll be sure to link it so folks can find you guys and continue to learn about Empower. It sounds like you guys are doing amazing things there with Empower. So, again, thank you for joining us. We'll let you get back to it, and hope you have a great holiday if we don't speak before then.
Great, thank you. Really appreciate it.